The European Union has ordered Apple and Facebook parent Meta to pay combined fines of 700 million euros, the first punitive acts taken under the Digital Markets Act, legislation that's designed to curb the power of big tech. The European Commission is fining Apple 500 million euros for failing to offer alternative app marketplaces to users as well as to app developers. Meta has been ordered to pay 200 million for breaching its obligation to give consumers the choice of a service that uses less personal data. Apple says the EU is moving the goalpost here. Meta calls it a multi-billion-dollar tariff on American business. The EU insists that this move is simply to ensure that everyone plays by the rules. Here's European Parliament member Andreas Schwab. He's one of the lead architects of the Digital Markets Act.
These measures have nothing to do with trade policy. It's European law, and European law has to be enforced. Whatever American government there is, whatever other governments may think about it, it's in the interest of open markets, and from these open markets, also American companies will flourish and will enjoy the benefits of.
Well, I'm joined now by William Kovacic. He's the director of the Competition Law Center at George Washington University. He also served as chairman of the Federal Trade Commission. Mr. Kovacic, it's good to have you with us this evening. Apple and Meta say that they're being unfairly targeted just for being American. How much of this is about enforcing competition rules and how much is about transatlantic trade politics?
I think it's first and foremost about enforcing competition rules. It's underscored by the fact that in the United States, for example, there are major competition law cases running involving the same companies, cases brought initially by the Trump administration, some added by the Biden administration. But the fact that the U.S. government itself is pursuing a number of cases that deal with similar issues, and that the U.S. courts thus far have upheld key theories of harm contained in those cases, suggests that the underlying issues are broad-based, and that the concern that we see reflected in the implementation of the DMA is part of a larger global consensus that competition policy has to be brought to bear on these companies.
Apple says that it is being forced to give away its technology for free. Does it have a point?
There would be a point to suggest that it's always important to consider the incentive effects of competition law on the way in which firms invest and operate is always a fair point. And I think competition policy officials, parliamentarians, have always been sensitive to that argument. But the argument by itself is not absolute. That is, competition law is concerned with creating opportunities for the emergence and growth of other companies so that, yes, incentive effects are front and center in the deliberation of competition agencies and legislators in formulating rules or formulating cases. But I'd say that those considerations do involve specific concern about maintaining a market framework in which new companies can enter and flourish.
These fines against Apple and Meta are the first real test of the EU's Digital Markets Act. But are they big enough to make a difference?
I don't think the fines by themselves are enough to make a difference. That is, we could ask ourselves what size of fine would be enough to matter truly to these companies. I think the more significant question is, do the specific conduct-related principles embedded in the DMA produce the kind of market outcomes that the creators of the framework hope to achieve? Mm-hmm. That's something that will require ongoing monitoring. The fines are an important element of the credibility of the framework, but the real test is going to be how the changes in behavior affect the market and whether these regulatory measures are supplemented by continuing competition law enforcement that will ensure that the system can adapt in a way that deals with new developments that sometimes, an adaptability that's sometimes hard to achieve when you write rules, legislation with specific prohibitions built in.
Yeah, and I think everyone would agree that these companies are major gatekeepers. I mean, they have a gatekeeping function. And it makes me wonder, can rules like these, can they actually rein in big tech's market power, or is this a battle where big tech is always on the verge of becoming too powerful?
I think it's a question of identifying a collection of policies that promote a good competitive result. The rules by themselves are important, but they're not sufficient. Among the limitations of rules is that they do not have an inherent flexibility and adaptability that other policy tools can bring to the picture. So it's a function of how we shape traditional competition law enforcement in Europe under Article 102 of the treaty, but also how we bring to bear other policies that are now in discussion in Europe, suggested by the Draghi report and others about creating an enabling environment in which new investment can flourish. So we need rules and principles that ensure that firms compete effectively on the merits. But I think, as is happening in Europe, we see a recognition that other policies are necessary to create a setting in which new entry and expansion of firms can flourish. And that's a mix of investment policy. It's a mix of policies that ensure integration of policymaking across the entire European Union. And it involves the continuation of what we might call older competition policy technology. That is the prosecution and litigation of traditional antitrust cases, in this case, under the abusive dominance provisions of the treaty.
Mr. Kovacic, let me ask you to put on your FTC hat for a moment. Should U.S. regulators, should they be learning from the European Union approach, or should they maybe be avoiding it?
They should be learning minute by minute, day by day. That is, to learn about the actual effects of the provisions that are being implemented through the DMA. One immediate application of that experience is in the formulation of remedies in the major U.S. abusive dominance cases. That is, the remedy phase of the Google search case brought by the Department of Justice is taking place right now. To the extent that we are seeing some evidence of how to design remedies, the effect of the implementation of the DMA, that's information that's enormously relevant to the Google search case, but the development of remedies in other cases. This is such a crucial experiment. And when you go back to the formation of the DMA, you hear policymakers recognizing that this is experimental. Well, a crucial element of experiments is to assess outcomes. Those outcomes are enormously important to policymakers, not simply in Europe and within its member states, but across the globe. So U.S. policymakers, legislators, and competition enforcement officials should be studying this experience very closely. And it puts a premium on effective cooperation between policymakers in Brussels to share in a detailed, candid way what they're learning about how it's working. There's no expectation that it works perfectly. So what has to be shared is information about what works, what's not working, what could be done better. This experience in Europe is vital to the effective implementation of policy across the globe.
Mr. Kovacic, I'm fascinating talking with you. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us this evening. Please come back again. There's a lot more to talk about. Thank you.
I look forward to next time. Thank you.
Well, joining me now is Sally Broughton Micova. She's a communications, policy, and politics professor at the University of East Anglia. It's good to have you with us this evening, Professor. The European Commission says that it sees these fines as a legitimate tool in legislation designed to curb the power of big tech. Is that what we're seeing here?
Well, yes, that is the point of the DMA. The Digital Markets Act is about addressing the gatekeeping power and trying to create more opportunities for others to enter into the marketplaces, to open up markets that have been dominated for quite some time now. This is implementation of that law. It is a regulatory action.
The fines, they may seem to be big, but for Meta, for Apple, they may actually be peanuts. I'm wondering, will these fines, will they significantly alter the way that these companies operate within the EU?
It's not so much the fines as what it is that they're expected to do now to comply. So They might not be peanuts per se, probably more than symbolic. But if you look at what they could have been fined, they could go as high as almost 4 billion. If we look at what Apple's, for instance, revenues were last year, and so these are not fines that say we're coming out swinging in a big way, but that fits in with what the law is. It's supposed to be proportional, and so these fines are probably indicating that these are infringements of a certain level. This is the first time we're doing them. This is a sign you need to change behavior. What is actually significant is what the firms now have to do in order to comply. Meta has already taken a second stab at a different option, and the commission is looking at that now. Apple has to make some changes in order to be in compliance with the law, and so we will see some notable changes in both of the services.
I wonder, what do you make of what both of the companies have said today? Apple has said that they're being forced to give away their technology for free. Meta saying that we're being unfairly targeted because we are American companies. What do you say to those arguments?
Well, I don't think any of them are being unfairly targeted because they are American per se. They're being targeted because they fit the criteria of gatekeepers under the law. And if any other company also fits the category of gatekeepers, then it would also be subject to the same law. So I don't think it has anything to do with any of them being American companies. In the end of the day, the implementation of the DMA is going to have significant consequences to the company's way they do business. And that is actually supposed to address the market power they have. That's kind of the point. So it is going to hit bottom lines.
For the consumer, will the consumer notice any changes, even if the companies enact what they're supposed to be enacting as a result of these fines?
Well, Meta users might have already noticed the difference because the fine that is being addressed to Meta applies to the 8 months following when the DMA came into force, and they are having another stab at trying to comply now. So Meta users should already see the options for having services that are not so based on personalized data. With Apple, people should see a difference in how the App Store operates and the ability for app developers to actually reach them in a different way other than through the App Store. So I think consumers who are paying attention will actually see some differences.
Professor Sally Broughton, Micova, we appreciate your time and your valuable insights tonight. Thank you.